The cake said, "Almost done." Martha Holloway, widow, retired caseworker, didn't blink. Her son laughed. Her daughter-in-law recorded, by dawn, both would be written out of her will, her deed, and every legal thread they'd ever clung to. They expected her silence. What they got was a signature. And by the time they realized, she'd already changed the locks. "We're about to begin, but if you'd like, share where you're joining from. It reminds me this story doesn't echo into silence. It lands somewhere real. Drop it in the comments and don't forget to subscribe." The laughter hit before the candles were even blown out. Bright pink frosting looped the words across the sheet cake like a warning. "Almost done." Balloons bobbed behind Martha Jean Holloway as she stared down at the cursive insult, the rattle of helium and wind behind her sounding like a slow, sarcastic applause. "Oh, come on, Mom," Thomas said, grinning like a schoolboy who'd stolen a cookie and gotten away with it. "It's funny." He raised a plastic cup filled with champagne. "Here's to early retirement and an early inheritance." Laughter, real, gut-deep, obnoxious laughter. Renee tilted her phone slightly, angling it just right to catch the moment for her blissfully family followers on Instagram. "Say cheese, Mom," she chirped, tapping record like she was filming a golden retriever doing a trick. Martha didn't say cheese. She didn't say a word. The backyard buzzed with chatter, the whine of cicadas and the faint scent of overripe roses from the bush she'd trimmed herself that morning. Her yard, her home, looked like a rental party space. Folding tables with plastic tablecloths, dollar store streamers sagging in the South Carolina humidity. Her own hydrangeas shoved aside to make room for a rented photo booth with a banner that read #Holloway turns 70. She spotted Kayla near the back fence, arms crossed tightly, pretending to look at her phone but not scrolling. The 18-year-old wasn't laughing. Her brows were pinched, like she was holding in something sour. "Don't worry," Frances muttered, stepping close enough that only Martha could hear. "They have no idea who they're standing on." Martha turned her head slightly. "No," she said. "They don't." Frances offered a sideways smile before biting into a piece of dry sheet cake. "Taste like betrayal with a buttercream finish." Martha didn't laugh. She nodded politely. When Renee came around with her phone and forced a selfie, clicking her tongue to signal a smile. "Come on, Mom. Look happy," Renee said, twisting her arm to catch the best angle for her stories. "My followers love generational moments." "You know what I love?" Martha said quietly, her voice a steady hum beneath the noise. "Privacy." Renee blinked, not understanding. Or maybe just not listening. "Speech time," Thomas called, clinking a fork against his solo cup. He stood on the patio chair, one of her patio chairs, and raised his drink again like a pastor blessing his congregation. "To my mother, 70 years of excellence, good health, and giving birth to someone as successful as me." Another round of chuckles. "May your golden years be short enough for the rest of us to enjoy." Another clang of laughter. Renee zoomed in. Someone whispered, "That's bold." Martha smiled then, but it was the kind you wear at a funeral for someone you never really liked. The party dragged until sunset, guests trickling out with plastic-wrapped slices of shame cake and half-empty gift bags. Thomas and Renee didn't help clean. Kayla lingered last, handing Martha a folded napkin. No words, just a slight squeeze on her grandmother's wrist. When the yard was quiet, when the buzz had finally died and the streetlights flickered to life outside, Martha locked the back door and climbed the stairs slowly. Not because she was tired, because she was timing the moment, like a conductor waiting for the perfect beat to raise the baton. She passed the guest room Renee always used, still stinking of lavender spray and entitlement, and stopped in front of the upstairs study. The door was locked, just as she'd left it. She opened the bottom drawer of the bookshelf, feeling beneath the false bottom until her fingers closed around cool metal. A key. Small, old, familiar. Inside the study, the air was still and untouched. It smelled of cedar wood and peppermint. Her sense, her space. On the far side, beneath a framed photo of her late husband, sat a heavy black fireproof file box. She knelt, slid it out, and placed it on the desk with a gentle thunk. The label on the top read, Exit Strategy. She unlatched it slowly. Not to reminisce, not to hesitate, but to begin. The candles were out, but something else had ignited. Not rage, not grief, something colder, more exacting. Martha sat beneath the yellowed glow of her desk lamp, her glasses low on her nose, a pen balanced between her fingers like a blade. She opened a fresh legal pad and wrote the number at the top of the page, $1,324,560, a figure they'd never bothered to ask about. Bonds, savings, retirement accounts, 2 low-risk annuities, and a long-forgotten municipal investment that had matured 5 months ago. All under her name, all untouched. In the drawer below sat a thick accordion file, every folder color-coded blue for bank accounts, red for taxes, green for deeds. She flipped them open, methodical. Her fingers moved with the calm assurance of someone who'd raised a child, buried a husband, survived breast cancer, and paid off a house without asking for help. The study smelled faintly of dust and peppermint. Outside, a lone cricket chirped, the only sound in the quiet neighborhood. Her backyard looked peaceful from the window, and Blusion wrapped in fairy lights and fake smiles. Her cell buzzed once. A text from Thomas. Thanks again for everything today, Mom. Hope you felt celebrated. Cake was Kayla's idea, lol. Martha stared at the screen, then deleted the message. She picked up the phone again and tapped a single name, David Leary. Evening, Martha. The voice said, warm and familiar. I need to revise my will, she said. From scratch. No copies. No traces. You and me only. There was a pause. You sound sure. I'm past sure. By mid-morning, David was at her door with his briefcase and a quiet nod. He didn't ask why. They'd worked together too long for that. He sat across from her in the study, laptop open, fingers poised. I want full confirmation that the house is solely mine, she said, handing over the tax records and deed. It is. Your name's been the only one on it since Charles passed. And the bonds? David scanned the list. His eyebrows lifted. You've been efficient. I've had time, Martha replied. And motivation. She stood and walked over to the hallway closet, retrieving a thick folder in a cracked leather binder. On the front, Holloway Family Trust, dated 2008. Frances arrived just after lunch, toting a Tupperware of potato salad and a shredder in a shopping bag. Let me do the honors, she said, plugging it in with the glee of someone slicing into scandal. This one's for the archive of ignorance. One by one, the papers disappeared into the hum of the machine. The trust. The original will. The document Thomas once called our inheritance roadmap. Gone. Feels better than wine, Frances muttered. Later, Martha logged into her online banking. Renee had been added years ago, just in case. Now she hovered over the Authorized Users tab and clicked Remove Access beside her name. Confirm. Done. There was no ping, no alert, no outward change, but something inside Martha settled. That night, she found an envelope slipped under her door. The handwriting was unmistakable. Blocky, uneven, honest. Grandma, I didn't know about the cake. I'm really sorry. Love, Kayla. Martha folded the note and placed it inside the green folder marked Future. Then she picked up the phone. David, she said when he answered. You can file it now. Everything? Yes. She could hear the clicking of his keyboard through the receiver. All right, he said finally. Estate updates filed. House deed verified. Trust officially revoked. Beneficiaries pending. Martha leaned back in her chair, her gaze drifting to the black file box in the corner. They'd spent years treating her like a placeholder. Now she was rewriting the terms, literally. The first thing to go was the pink silk robe, still hanging on the back of the guest room door, like it owned the hinge. Martha pinched the fabric between her fingers. It smelled like citrus body spray and entitlement. She folded it into the cardboard box already half-filled with unopened PR skincare mailers, each one addressed to Renee Holloway, as if Martha's home were just another shipping hub for someone else's online persona. The room had once belonged to Kayla, before she outgrew the floral wallpaper and twin bed. Now it was where Renee kept her overflow. Serums, camera lights, travel ring binders, monogrammed robes, all stacked neatly under the illusion of belonging. But Martha knew better. This wasn't a home to them. It was a stage. She wiped down the vanity mirror with glass cleaner, catching her own reflection mid-swipe. Her lips tightened. There was something freeing about polishing the glass while erasing Renee's fingerprints from the edges. Under the bed, she found a crushed Amazon box labeled Collagen Partner Kit and tossed it in without hesitation. By the time Frances arrived with a thermos of coffee and a pack of lemon muffins, 3 boxes were taped shut and stacked by the door. "Spring cleaning in August?" Frances asked, setting down the thermos with a wink. "More like a recalibration," Martha replied, opening her laptop to change the Wi-Fi password. The new one she typed was deliberate. "Not your home 70. Frances let out a low whistle. "That's poetry." Martha moved through the hallway like a surgeon, precise, detached. She installed a deadbolt on her study door, the kind with a 4-digit keypad. As she punched in the code for the first time, she felt something shift in her chest. Not anger, not pride, just certainty. The doorbell rang mid-morning. Thomas, still in golf attire and holding an iced coffee, leaned against the doorframe with the smugness of someone who believed blood was a permanent passport. "Hey ma, quick favor. Mind if I take the Subaru this weekend? Renee's car's acting up and it's being sold," Martha said, her voice steady. Thomas blinked. "What?" "The Subaru," she repeated. "It's being donated. Paperwork's already in motion." He laughed, confused. "Donated? Why?" Frances stepped into the foyer from the kitchen, still sipping her coffee. "Because sometimes people give back without expecting a camera crew." Martha didn't smile. She held out a document for Thomas to glance at. "Transfer of title, Greenville Community Resource Center." "I figured they could put it to better use than cosmetics halls," she said. Thomas didn't take the paper. "You could have talked to me first." "I could have," Martha agreed, then closed the door gently but firmly behind him. By afternoon, Renee was posting filtered selfies in a wide-brim hat with captions like "Not all moms are sweet, but at least the skin stays glowing." To passive-aggressive enough to sting, but veiled just enough to deny it. Frances raised an eyebrow when Martha showed her. "You know what I'd reply?" "I don't respond to emojis," Martha said. That evening, she found another envelope under her door. This one was heavier. Inside was a USB drive and a note. "I thought you should see this, Kay." Martha took the drive to her study, locked the door, and plugged it into her laptop. The video was grainy but clear. Thomas, sitting on a bar stool, drink in hand. Renee behind the camera. "You really think she's gonna leave us with nothing?" he said, scoffing. "Please. She's too sentimental. Guilt's her love language." "Did you see her face when she read the cake?" Renee giggled. "Yeah, probably planning to write us out in her little diary." Thomas smirked. "Like she's some TV villain." Renee's laugh was sharp. "She wouldn't dare." Martha hit pause. The air in the study turned still, dense. They didn't know it yet, but they'd handed her proof. Proof of contempt, proof of motive, and soon they'd learn what quiet fury could do with documentation. The smile wasn't hers. It had been filtered, cropped, and frozen mid-blink. Her face twisted into a parody beneath a caption that read, "When your ML serves salt with her silence." And hash family drama. But make it viral. Martha stared at the post on Renee's public Instagram page, the screen casting a cold blue glow across her face in the early morning dark. She hadn't planned on checking, but the video Kayla had sent the night before had shifted something. Now she scrolled with the precision of a surgeon, one incision at a time. Renee's page was a curated display of weaponized aesthetics, matching outfits, unearned quotes, faux gratitude, and snide remarks passed off as relatable content. Martha saw it all, not just the surface, the pattern, the cruelty masquerading as clout. One post featured a photo of the birthday cake, her own hand frozen mid-cut. "When the cake says what you're too polite to." Another a story highlight labeled Mill Moments, where Renee stitched together clips of Martha looking grumpy during holidays. The comments buzzed with strangers laughing at a woman they'd never met. She took a deep breath, cool and slow, and began taking screenshots. Every post, every hashtag, every smirking comment Renee liked from followers who wrote things like OMG Toxic Grandmas Unite. Each image was renamed and dropped into a new desktop folder. Public evidence of disrespect. She crafted the email with no emotion, just fact. Subject update clause see attachment. 37 files. Body David, these may assist in solidifying the grounds for revision. Let's discuss language around moral character. MJH she hit send, closed the laptop and exhaled. A long solid breath, the kind that precedes action. Later that afternoon, she heard a quiet knock on the front door. When she opened it, Kayla stood there in jeans and a backpack, her eyes darting to the camera mounted above the porch light. I told them I was going for a walk, she said. I wanted to talk. Can I come in? Martha stepped aside, wordlessly. Inside, the house smelled of cinnamon tea and wood polish. The silence was warm, not empty. Kayla sat down on the edge of the couch, twisting a ring around her thumb. They shouldn't talk about you like that, she said, voice low. I see it, I just never know what to do. You came here, Martha replied. That counts for something. Kayla looked up. Are you mad at me? For not saying something sooner? Martha shook her head. No, you're still growing your spine. I remember what that felt like. Kayla gave a half smile, shy but real. I don't want to end up like them. Then don't study their habits, Martha said. Study their consequences. A beat passed, then Kayla leaned over and hugged her. Not a quick hug. Not a guilt hug. A stay a while kind of hug. When she left, Martha watched her walk down the sidewalk, head high, backpack bouncing with every step. Frances arrived not long after, letting herself in through the back, holding a white ceramic mug with both hands like it held secret. For you, she said, handing it over. The words were painted in bold blue cursive. Matriarch in motion. Martha chuckled softly. It's dramatic. You're dramatic, Frances said. And thorough. So I figured it fit. Martha turned the mug over in her hands. They think I'm just sitting here stewing in silence. Yeah, Frances said, grabbing a shortbread from the counter. They think a lot of things. Martha's phone buzzed. She picked it up and read the name on the screen. David Leary. She answered, already knowing. Got your email, he said. And the attachments. Well, I assume we're ready. David said, voice steady, almost reverent. To discuss total removal? Martha didn't blink. They removed themselves, she said. I'm just making it official. The pen didn't shake. It glided, steady and final, across the signature line like it had been waiting years to make contact. Martha Jean Holloway signed her name in blue ink on the document that would officially remove Thomas and Renee Holloway from her estate. Every line, every clause, every expectation gutted with quiet precision. David sat across from her in his downtown office, the buzz of fluorescent lights above, and a faint hum of a printer churning nearby. Outside, downtown Greenville shimmered in the late morning sun, unaware that something irreversible had just occurred inside a small paneled room with a locked cabinet and a lawyer who never underestimated older women. Witness signature. Here, he said, pointing calmly to the next line. Martha signed again. David checked each page like a surgeon double-checking a transplant. They're out, he said, when he looked up. All accounts will reflect that within 48 hours. House title, Roth Distributions. Emergency contact rights, trust disbursement, everything. And Kayla? Martha asked. Conditional, David confirmed. Per your instruction, she'll inherit full rights to the estate, including property and assets, at 25. But only if she maintains voluntary contact in writing or in person, at least once annually. Otherwise, it defaults to the Community Resource Trust. Good, Martha said, tucking her copy into a plain manila envelope. No one coasts on DNA. On her way home, Martha stopped by a modest red brick bank building nestled off Augusta Street, where she signed for a long-term safety deposit box under a private code name, Maple Vault 1109. Inside it she placed three things: the finalized estate file, the revised trust documents, and a sealed envelope addressed to Kayla. "If I go before you're ready, just know I saw you." The steel drawer closed with a smooth, echoing slide. Back at home, Martha moved differently, lighter, more anchored. She walked into the study, where she'd prepped the decoy, a faux final will inside a navy blue binder with a gold embossed title, The Holloway Legacy. Inside were hollow documents, pages of outdated jargon, blank addendums, and a single typed line that read, "If you're reading this, I've already done the real work elsewhere." She placed it in the unlocked drawer of her filing cabinet, right next to a manila folder labeled Family Birth Certificates. The perfect bait. That afternoon, while Martha clipped herbs from her backyard for supper, she heard the front door swing open. No knock, no call, just the confident, habitual rhythm of someone who believed they still belonged. "Mom?" Renee's voice echoed down the hallway, chipper with artificial brightness. Martha didn't answer. She moved slower, letting her footsteps land silent on the kitchen tile. Renee passed the kitchen entirely and made her way upstairs. The floorboards groaned faintly. Then, a long pause. Martha waited. 15 minutes later, the door closed just as quietly. A car engine started, tires crunching the gravel, and silence resumed. Martha returned to the sink, washing rosemary with methodical ease. Later that night, as the sunset bled orange through the blinds, her phone buzzed with a text alert. "Renee, we're still on the will. She's just bluffing. Binders in her desk. I took pics." Martha smiled, just once, the kind of smile that never reached her lips, but anchored in the bones. She tapped the phone screen off and placed it face down. Let them celebrate their illusion. Let them toast to a fantasy where control still belonged to them. They didn't know the ink was dry, the vault was sealed, and the locks had already changed. The first time Martha saw her own name in bold print on a news page, it wasn't in an obituary. It was under the headline, "Local Woman Quietly Funds 2 Scholarships, Changes Lives." Her hands didn't tremble when she held the paper, but they lingered just long enough to feel the texture of ink on her fingertips, as if to confirm that yes, the world had seen her without needing Thomas or Renee to hold the flashlight. The article sat in the Sunday Features section, just below the fold. A candid photo showed her outside the Greenville Community Resource Center, squinting slightly in the late spring sun, one hand tucked into her jacket pocket. No posed smiles, no filters, just a woman with a purpose and a ledger. The reporter, a young woman named Leon Granger, had reached out after hearing from a volunteer at the center. She'd asked for a 5-minute chat. They ended up talking for 2 hours. "You funded both the Child of Promise Fund and the Second Start Scholarship?" Leanne had asked, stunned. "Both anonymously?" Martha had smiled, just barely. "I didn't do it to be remembered. I did it so someone else could be." Now the story was public. No more anonymity, no more silence. Just her name, in black and white beside her quiet war. Back home, Francis was already waiting on the porch with a bag of kettle popcorn and a smug grin that had clearly been building all morning. "You, absolute queen," she said, tossing a handful of popcorn in the air and catching it in her mouth. "You just played the long game and didn't even flinch." Martha chuckled. "It wasn't a game." Francis raised an eyebrow. "Tell that to the grown man who thinks a binder full of expired forms is gonna pay his mortgage." The phone rang inside. Martha didn't move to answer it. She already knew who wouldn't be calling. Thomas and Renee said nothing. No texts, no calls, not even a fake congratulations in a comment section. Renee's socials went on as usual. Matcha recipes, fake laughter, and filtered beach trips from 3 summers ago passed off as current vibes. Thomas hadn't posted anything in weeks. But later that night, a single message buzzed on her screen. "Kayla. Saw the article. I'm proud of you." "They're not. But I am. You looked strong." Martha read it twice, then pressed record on the small video camera she'd set up earlier that day on her study shelf. Her face filled the frame. No makeup, just morning light from the east window casting a soft glow behind her. "If anyone ever asks if I was okay during all of this," she said, voice even, "this is the answer. I saw what they did. I heard what they said. I watched them laugh at the idea of me vanishing, not realizing I'd already made myself unforgettable." She paused, then added, "I'm documenting this for myself, in case they ever pretend they cared." She clicked stop and saved the file. Video diary _entry 01. MP4. 2 days later, Thomas sat at his desk, staring at his phone screen in silence. The camera still was paused on Martha's face mid-sentence. Behind him, Renee folded laundry with exaggerated aggression. "She's obviously losing it. Who talks to a camera like that?" "Plenty of people," Thomas muttered. "But this is different." He hit forward and typed in a name, his attorney from the old estate consultations. The message was short. "Can this count as evidence of mental instability? Might need to consider conservatorship options." He hit send, not knowing Martha already had more paperwork than he did, and not a single page was bluff. Martha undergoes a voluntary mental evaluation and passed flawlessly. The nurse smiled politely, but her eyes flicked to the clipboard like she was expecting a stumble. Martha didn't give her one. She sat straight in the cushioned chair of the psychiatric evaluation room, legs crossed at the ankle, hands resting calmly on her lap. A soft ticking clock filled the silence between each question. The air smelled faintly of antiseptic and coffee, familiar scents from her years as a social worker, back when she helped others survive what people assumed would break them. "Can you tell me the date?" the clinician asked gently. "August 12th, Martha replied without missing a beat. "And your full name?" "Martha Jean Holloway. Born April 2nd, 1955. The questions continued. Memory checks, situational reasoning, cognition, mood. She passed each one like a woman reciting a life she built herself. Not one she was confused about. Not one she was willing to surrender to anyone else's version of the truth. An hour later she stood at the front desk and asked, with the same grace she once reserved for court testimony, "Can I get that certified and notarized before I leave?" By the end of the day she had it in hand. Psychiatric cognitive evaluation. Results, within normal range. Capacity intact. And beneath that in flowing ink, client is oriented, articulate, and demonstrates clear understanding of all legal and financial matters discussed. Back home, she recorded a second video. This time her voice was deliberate, controlled. "My name is Martha Jean Holloway. I am of sound mind and memory. No one is acting on my behalf. No one is influencing my choices. What I leave behind is my decision, and no one else's." She held the notarized letter up beside her face, slowly, then folded it and placed it in the green future folder. The video file went to David that afternoon, along with a message, "Update my estate record with this. Let them try something now." David replied within the hour. "Already done. Legally bulletproof. But buckle in, noise is coming." He wasn't wrong. The conservatorship petition came by certified mail 3 days later. Renee's lawyer had filed it under concern for declining cognitive capacity and signs of erratic behavior. Martha read it once, then set it down beside her tea. Frances squinted at the papers. "They really think that'll stick. They're betting on perception," Martha said. "Not proof." David handled the filing himself. He didn't just submit Martha's evaluation and video. He attached copies of her financial statements, timestamps, and a record of Renee's own social media comments, highlighted and dated. The rejection came down in under 48 hours. Petition denied. No evidence to support claims of incapacity. Filing noted as unsupported and retaliatory in nature. Martha printed the ruling, folded it neatly, and tucked it into a cream-colored envelope. On the front, Thomas Holloway. No return address. No stamp. She hand-delivered it to his mailbox. Inside was just one sentence. "I see you. Still." That night, as the street lights flickered on outside and moths tapped against her window screen, Martha brewed chamomile and listened to the quiet. Not silence. Not peace. Just the kind of quiet that happens after someone tries to burn you down and fails. Her phone buzzed. "Kayla." She answered immediately. Grandma? Her voice was a low whisper, like she was in a hallway somewhere. I just wanted to say, I think they're planning something. Martha didn't move. What kind of something? I don't know exactly, Kayla said, breath catching, but they've been talking late. About the house. About getting power of attorney. Maybe. I thought you should know. Martha stared into the dark of her study, her reflection faint in the window. Thank you, sweetheart, she said gently. You just gave me more than you know. Next day, Martha installed a new security system. The locksmith didn't ask questions. When she handed him the old brass keys, he just nodded and said, 3 deadbolts. New codes. No copies. Right? Right? Martha answered. Only mine. The locks clicked into place one by one, loud and final, like punctuation marks on years of unspoken dismissal. The air inside the house shifted cooler, lighter, like it had exhaled alongside her. She stood in the entryway as the last lock latched, watching the man test each door. No one's getting in unless they ask permission now, he said. That's the idea, Martha replied, and handed him a check already filled out. She'd started with the doors, but she didn't stop there. The next morning, she sat at the dining table, sunlight streaming in through the bay windows, reflecting off the hardwood, with her laptop open and a hot mug of ginger tea in her hand. One by one she pulled up the accounts. Banking, investments, retirement distributions, health records. Then under account settings, she found the name, Emergency Contact Thomas Holloway. She clicked Remove. Secondary Contact Renee Holloway. Remove. She hovered for a moment, then clicked Add. Typed Frances Boyd. Down the block? Frances answered her phone on the second ring. Mornin', what are we locking down now? She said, her voice chipper and already laced with mischief. Martha smiled. I'm naming you as my temporary healthcare proxy. If I'm hospitalized, it's your call. Frances whooped. Finally, all those years of being a bossy neighbor, and now I get to do it legally. You've earned it, Martha said, her voice warm but quiet. They haven't. That same day, Thomas opened his phone to check on a joint account he hadn't technically been removed from yet, and was greeted with a red banner, login failed. Unrecognized device. He tried again. Same result. By the third try, the screen locked. He stared at it like it had betrayed him personally, then muttered, She's really doing it. Renee, sitting across the kitchen table, didn't look up from her phone. Told you. She's not just bluffing anymore. She's on her weird power trip. Within hours, a new TikTok appeared on Renee's feed. The caption scrolled across a filtered selfie of her fake crying under a weighted blanket. Caring for toxic parents is exhausting. Boundaries save lives. Haas healing journey hash. Unfollow if triggered. Frances saw it first. She held out her phone to Martha, who was tending the herb garden out back. Please tell me this is a performance art piece, and not her actual brain at work. Martha didn't even look at the screen. She pinched off a sprig of thyme and placed it gently in the basket beside her. Do they ever hear themselves? Frances asked. They're too loud trying to be heard by everyone else, Martha said, standing up. That afternoon, she opened her estate file once more. With slow, deliberate strokes, she added a single handwritten clause to the front page of her updated will. My piece is not up for discussion. It is not property. It is not a transaction. It is earned, and it is mine. She initialed the margin and dated it. The pen pressed harder than usual on the final dot. Evening fell, the golden light slanting across the study and catching the edges of the framed photos on the bookshelf. Her and Charles. Her and Kayla. Never Thomas. Never Renee. The phone rang. David's name flashed on the screen. She answered on the first ring. They just filed something, he said. Voice tight. A motion to freeze your assets. Based on financial deteriorations and suspicious withdrawals. Martha blinked slowly. And, it won't go far, he said. But it's official. They're trying to take control. Martha walked over to the window, pulled the curtain back an inch. Outside, her house stood still, strong, locked, ready. Then it's time, she said. For what? She didn't hesitate to remind them I was always 5 steps ahead. The courtroom smelled like dust and formality, wood polish, old carpet, and desperation dressed in suits. Martha sat in the front row beside David, her spine straight, her hands folded in her lap, the lines around her eyes sharp with clarity, not age. Across the aisle, Thomas looked like he was auditioning for sincerity, neatly pressed collar, sad eyes practiced in the mirror. Renee, seated beside him, wore beige like armor and smirked like she'd already won. Don't say a word unless prompted, David murmured, flipping through the manila folder on his lap. They're expecting theatrics. We'll give them facts. Martha gave a small nod. Her eyes never left the judge. It didn't take long for the show to begin. Your Honor, Thomas said, standing before the bench with artificial poise, we're deeply concerned about our mother's mental well-being. She's been acting erratically, changing legal documents in secret, isolating herself, mismanaging finances. The judge, a middle-aged woman with silver-streaked hair and a steel-trap gaze, raised an eyebrow. You're requesting to freeze her assets on what grounds? Renee leaned forward, voice syrupy. She's making major financial moves that don't align with her prior decisions. She's cut off communication. We're afraid she's being manipulated. David rose calmly. Permission to respond with documentation. The judge nodded. Proceed. David moved like a man holding trump cards. He began with the cognitive evaluation signed, notarized, time-stamped, then the video diaries, shown in short clips, Martha speaking clearly, purposefully, with no signs of confusion or coercion. Next came the bank statements, meticulously organized, every transaction clean, no unexplained withdrawals, no red flags. Finally, he handed the judge a copy of Renee's social media posts, snide captions, mocking reels, hashtags, like #MillMadness and #Elder Issues are real. The courtroom fell silent as the judge read through the screenshots. David didn't gloat. He didn't need to. Miss Holloway, the judge said, turning to Martha for the first time, do you wish to make a statement? Martha met her gaze squarely. No, ma'am. The truth doesn't need a monologue. The judge sat back. A pause, then petition denied. There is no evidence of financial mismanagement or diminished capacity. This filing appears retaliatory and manipulative in nature. You're dismissed. Renee's face contorted. She stood too quickly, knocking her purse off her lap. This is ridiculous. You're ridiculous, Frances muttered from the second row, where she'd come dressed in a shirt that said, Ain't dead yet in rhinestones. Thomas turned red, jaw clenched. As they walked past Martha, he muttered under his breath, She's poisoned Kayla against us. Martha didn't flinch. She didn't need to. The judge had spoken, and court records didn't lie. Back home that evening, the sky was soft with smoke-blue clouds, and the cicadas had begun their restless chorus. Martha stepped into her study, opened the bottom drawer of her filing cabinet, and pulled out the decoy will. She carried it out to the backyard, where Frances had built a fire in the old cast-iron pit they used every fall. You sure? Frances asked, holding out the lighter. Martha nodded. It was never real. The flames licked high as the binder fell in. The gold-embossed Holloway legacy bubbled and blackened, page by page. The fire popped and spit like it knew what it was erasing. An hour later, as the coals glowed down to memory, Martha's phone buzzed with a voicemail. She tapped play. Kayla. They crossed a line I didn't know existed, Grandma. They looked scared in court. Not sorry. Scared. I know who I trust now. Martha leaned back in the porch chair, her fingers relaxed on the armrest. The next morning, she sat with David in his office once more. She slid him a small handwritten note. Amen Trust, Kayla Holloway, receives full estate and property control at 25, contingent on maintaining voluntary contact annually. David read it, then looked up. Are you sure? She showed up. Martha said, That's enough. They didn't remember the cake she made for Thomas's 9th birthday, spelled his name out in chocolate chips, or the scarf she knitted for Renee the Christmas after her miscarriage, even though they never acknowledged the letter she sent with it. But Martha remembered every forgotten thank you, every quiet slight, every time her name was replaced with her at a dinner table she paid for. Now the table was hers again. The dining room glowed with warm amber light, candles flickering in mason jars along the center. No balloons, no hashtags, no forced toasts, just a roast chicken, rosemary potatoes, and 3 sets of real silverware clinking gently against white porcelain. I still say this smells like apology and rebellion, Frances said, biting into a roll. Martha smiled faintly. Not an apology, just acknowledgement. Kayla sat across from her, cheeks pink from the warmth, her phone tucked away for once. This is better than any birthday we've ever had with them, she said. It feels like you. I'm not celebrating years, Martha said, lifting her glass of iced tea. Just moments. And this one matters. After dinner, she pulled an envelope from her pocket and slid it across the table to Kayla. It was thick, sealed in gold wax. The teen hesitated, glancing up. What is this? Read it later, Martha said. But know this now, you earned it. All of it. Kayla nodded, eyes damp but steady. The next morning the message came through as a voicemail. Thomas, we need to talk. Like adults. Enough with this drama, Mom. You're making it worse than it needs to be. I'm your son. Blocked. Martha didn't hesitate. Her thumb hovered for half a second before pressing the button with finality. Blocked. An hour later, Frances burst through the front door without knocking, holding her phone aloft. You need to see this, she said. On the screen was Renee, filming herself driving slowly past Martha's house, camera tilted to catch the lawn and porch. Her voice was soft, sweet. Just checking on our sweet matriarch, hoping she's okay since she hasn't returned our calls. Family is everything. Martha didn't speak. She picked up the house phone, not her cell, and dialed, non-emergency, she told dispatch. Yes, I'd like to report a recurring vehicle that's circling my home. By the time the patrol car rolled by later that evening, Renee was gone, but Frances, ever thorough, had filed the trespass affidavit with a printed timestamp and screenshot attached. They want eyes on you, Frances muttered as they sat on the porch. But you're not what they'll see. Just reflections of who they couldn't become. Martha stood at dawn the next day, dressed in navy slacks, and a sweater Charles once loved, gray with those tiny leather buttons he used to fiddle with when he was nervous. She walked to the cemetery herself. No driver, no company, just her, a small bouquet of white daisies, and a silence only she could understand. The headstone sat untouched. She crouched gently, pressing the flowers against the cool marble, her hand resting just above his name. You'd be proud of the silence I kept, she whispered, and louder still of the way I ended it. She stayed until the sun crept over the treetops, golden and indifferent. Then she stood, brushed her hands together, and left without turning back. That evening, as the sky bruised purple and the porch light clicked on automatically, her phone buzzed. Unknown number. A text. Hey Martha, it's Cheryl, remember me? I'm friends with Renee. Just a heads up, they're calling around. Realtors, trying to see if they can force a sale somehow. Thought you should know. Martha stared at the message, the weight of it slow but not heavy. She didn't panic. She smiled. Because every lock had been changed, and they hadn't yet learned. You can't sell what doesn't belong to you anymore. The courthouse hallway was cold and echoing, the kind of place where things were made official and impossible to undo. Martha stood in line with her folder tucked neatly beneath one arm, her coat buttoned to the collar. Her fingers didn't tremble. She had brought too many clients through these very doors in her former life to let nerves have her now. When her number was called, she stepped forward. Purpose for visit? The clerk asked without looking up. To file a deed transfer into an irrevocable trust, Martha replied, placing the folder on the counter with careful hands. The clerk blinked, glanced at the papers, then looked up, really looked at her. Is this for personal property? My home, Martha said, and everything attached to it. The seal stamped down on the final page with a satisfying thump, ink bleeding into permanence. In that moment, she was no longer just the owner of her home, she was the architect of its future. The next morning, the Greenville Chronicle ran a follow-up story, front page lower left corner, elder financial abuse attempt derailed in Greenville. The article detailed the petition Thomas and Renee had filed, the court's rejection, and the woman who had not only defended herself, but had now legally sealed her estate in a trust inaccessible to anyone but herself, and later Kayla. Frances clipped the article out and taped it to Martha's refrigerator. "You're papered up now," she grinned. "If that don't say untouchable, I don't know what does." A week later, the community center held their annual Voices of Grace Awards. Martha hadn't expected anything more than polite applause. Instead, she was called to the front of the room with a standing ovation. Her name was engraved on a mahogany plaque beneath the title, Legacy Advocate, for courage, quiet power, and unshakable integrity. The moment should have felt surreal, but it didn't. It felt earned. Until she saw him. Thomas, in the back, arms crossed, face tight. He hadn't been invited. He stood behind the rows of chairs like a wolf dressed as a sheepdog, waiting for her to notice him. Frances leaned in, whispering, "Guess who just stepped in unannounced?" "I see him," Martha murmured, her smile never breaking as she accepted the plaque. "Let security see him too." 2 minutes later, a center volunteer escorted Thomas off the premises. He didn't resist, but his glare cut through the room like a broken promise. Frances, in true form, wasn't done. The next morning, her front lawn bore a brand new yard sign, white with bold black letters. "This house is not for your gain." Underneath, in smaller script, "Property secured, documented and loved." The sign went viral on local Facebook groups. Neighborhood moms shared it with captions like, "We need more women like this." Retiree Kapers posted heart emojis and wrote, "She reminds me of my mother." Strong to the end. Martha didn't reply to any of it, but she saved the photo to her phone. The calm lasted until Thursday morning. She opened her email to find a digital invitation from an unfamiliar address, but the font, the pastel color scheme, and the signature at the bottom made it unmistakable. "Join us in celebrating our beloved mom's birthday. Brunch and blessings." The event banner was a doctored image of Martha smiling at last year's party. The same backyard, same cake, but the frosting now read, "Loved always." She blinked once, then scrolled down to the guest list. Over 40 names. Most of them mutual acquaintances. All of them likely unaware the invitation was a farce, manufactured for optics, for followers, for sympathy. Frances stormed in 5 minutes later holding the same email printed out. "Tell me this is a joke." Martha closed her laptop. "No," she said quietly. "It's bait." And she'd never been more ready to snap the line. Martha didn't wear a sash. There were no hashtags or helium balloons, no influencers filming vegan mimosa tutorials from folding chairs, just fresh-baked biscuits, sun streaming through the tall windows of the Greenville Community Center, and the scent of coffee so rich it coated the air like velvet. 2 days later, her birthday brunch had no RSVP list, no photographers, no clickbait guest tags, but it had meaning. She moved through the room slowly, not because of age but because this was meant to be savored. Long tables lined with white linens were filled with neighbors, volunteers, scholarship recipients, and women she'd once mentored. Each one had a reason to be there. Not one of them shared blood with her. And yet, it felt more like family than anything she'd had in years. Frances waved her over to the front row, motioning wildly like a stage mom. "You're gonna want a front seat for this," she whispered. "Trust me." The lights dimmed slightly as Kayla took the stage. She held a simple guitar and looked almost too small under the spotlight, but when she opened her mouth, her voice was clear, unshaken. The lyrics weren't fancy. They didn't need to be. Just words about quiet strength, about watching someone endure what others mocked, about learning how to stand by watching someone sit still and refuse to bow. "I used to think legacy was something you earned," Kayla sang, "but maybe it's just the silence you don't let them steal." When she finished, there was no applause for a second, just breath held across the room like reverence. Then it came, long and rising, and Kayla bowed her head, cheeks flushed, eyes glittering. Martha clapped the loudest. After the music, David approached her near the refreshment table. He was dressed less like a lawyer, and more like a longtime friend, which by now he was both. "I have something for you," he said, handing over a crisp black folder. Gold stamped on the front, Holloway Estate, final amendment, executed and sealed. "It's all in there?" Martha asked. "Every word," David nodded. "Undisputed, uncontestable." She opened the folder just enough to glance inside, then closed it again with care. "I won't need to explain it," she said. "They'll feel it." When she raised her glass later for a toast, it wasn't rehearsed, just spoken like a woman who'd spent too many years pretending she wasn't watching everything. "To those who left," she said, her voice strong and deliberate, "and made room for better." The room raised their glasses in return. Frances shouted, "Hear, hear," from the back. Kayla leaned against the stage, smiling up at her like the child she used to be had just met the woman she was becoming. Later, as the last guests filtered out, and the sun climbed high above the trees, Martha walked down the main hallway. The community center's donor wall, usually reserved for retired judges and doctors, now bore a new addition, her photograph in a matte black frame. The plaque beneath read Martha J. Holloway, advocate architect, matriarch, not mother, not wife, not someone's property, just herself. That evening, back home, she checked her phone once out of curiosity. Renee's doctored birthday video had flopped. The comments weren't pitying, they were sharp. Supporters had dug up the court documents, the news stories, the interviews. Her followers, once loyal, now flooded the post with replies. "Didn't she take you to court? This feels manipulative. Respect your elders, especially when they're smarter than you." Martha didn't reply. She didn't even smile. Instead, she walked upstairs, unlocked the safe in her study, and placed the finalized will inside, beside one more envelope. Cream paper, no name on the front, just 3 typed words, "To whomever feels entitled." The email went out at 6:01 a.m., just as the sky began to soften from navy to ash. It wasn't accidental. It was surgical, sent before anyone had time to caffeinate, strategize, or spin. Subject line: Advance Notice of Irrevocable Will Execution. Holloway Estate, from David Leary, attorney at law to Thomas Holloway, Renee Holloway, Kayla Holloway, Frances Boyd. Attached was a 7-page PDF, legally binding, stamped, signed, and certified. The document did not request feedback. It did not allow for questions. It spoke with finality, because Martha had made sure it would. Thomas opened the attachment first. He was still in bed, phone warm in his palm, breath fogging up the screen. He scrolled past the legal header, past the opening clause, until his eyes froze on line 17. "The following individuals are hereby disinherited without provision: Thomas Holloway and Renee Holloway." He blinked, heart hammering. Beneath the line, a footnote: "See attached. Documented evidence of financial coercion, emotional harassment, and public defamation." He clicked the link. There they were, screenshots of Renee's social posts, transcripts from the court hearing, Thomas's own words captured on Kayla's video file. "Guilt's her love language," highlighted in bold. A sound escaped his throat. Not anger. Not yet. Something closer to panic. Renee read the will next. She was already in the kitchen, sipping a smoothie, one hand flipping through her planner when the email dinged. She opened it. She read the line. She didn't make a sound, but her cheeks went pale, and her fingers stopped moving. Further down, she saw the clause about Kayla, recipient of full estate control, residential property, liquid assets, and trust management, upon reaching age 25, contingent on continued voluntary contact. And another: Frances Boyd shall receive the second vehicle, property keyholder authority in case of emergency, and a personal letter of recognition from the testator. Frances, meanwhile, opened the document with one eyebrow raised and a cinnamon roll in hand. After she read it, she leaned back in her chair and muttered, "Well, damn." Martha wasn't hiding anymore. She was archiving. By noon no one had called. No one dared. So Martha made her own move. She sat at her study desk, lit by the soft autumn light filtering through lace curtains, and drafted a simple group email. Subject: no clarifications offered. In case anyone forgets what happened, I preserved it legally. Everything was earned. Nothing was stolen. And silence, in my case, was never the absence of memory. MJH. Kayla responded first. I read it all. And I'm still here. Thank you. Renee responded 3 hours later with a message that began, "This seems unnecessarily hurtful," and ended with a passive attempt at reconciliation. Martha didn't even open it. She clicked delete, then empty trash. David called that evening just after dinner. Martha was sipping peppermint tea on the porch, watching the last hint of sun disappear over the trees. "They've received it," he said, "and the notarized letter makes the terms public record." "I know," she said. "Want to know the odd part?" She raised an eyebrow. "I've had 3 calls today from other clients, older women. They're asking for amendments to their will. Inspired by you." Martha didn't answer. Not right away. Then she said, "I wasn't trying to inspire." "I know," David replied. "But truth echoes whether we mean for it to or not." Later that night, she sat alone in her upstairs study, the house hushed and still. Her inbox buzzed once more. Unknown sender. The message was short. "You've started something bigger than you know. Thank you." No signature. No hint of identity. Just a reverberation. She stared at the screen, then closed the laptop gently. Her will had spoken, and for once everyone else would be the ones left speechless. The oven clicked off with a soft ding, and the scent of vanilla, butter and brown sugar filled the kitchen like a memory she didn't owe anyone. Martha slid the cake out with steady hands, her mitts worn but clean, and placed the pan on the cooling rack with a gentle exhale. It was a quiet evening. No decorations, no audience. The sky beyond the window was a soft watercolor blur, peach sinking into plum, and the cicadas buzzed faintly in the trees. The quiet felt earned, sacred. She moved with purpose, not nostalgia. Her fingers spread the icing across the cake in slow, deliberate strokes, thick white buttercream that she whipped herself, sweetened just enough. She took her time with the piping bag, the words appearing letter by letter, the message meant only for her, already gone. She stepped back, wiped a smudge of frosting from her wrist, and stared at the cake. No candles, no forced wishes, just truth. At the back door, Kayla appeared holding a sapling in a burlap sack, dirt still clinging to its thin roots. "Got the red maple," she said with a small smile. "Just like you asked." Martha nodded, slipping off her apron. "Let's dig." They moved to the far edge of the yard, past the hydrangeas and the fading garden bench, where the soil turned soft beneath their hands. The smell of earth was rich and familiar, like old rain and fresh beginnings. "Why here?" Kayla asked as she pressed the roots into the hole. "Because it won't grow too fast," Martha said, patting the soil down, "but it'll outlast the noise." As they smoothed the dirt, Frances emerged from the side gate, dragging a folding lawn chair and a bottle of lemonade under one arm. "You weren't seriously going to plant a tree without backup, were you?" she said, unfolding the chair beside the sapling and settling in with a huff. Martha gestured to the cake on the tray by the porch. "I baked." Frances leaned over to read the icing and let out a soft whistle. "Already gone. You don't miss." "I'm not angry anymore," Martha said, watching the last of the sun slant between the fence slats. Kayla glanced over. "You sure?" Martha looked down at the dirt still clinging to her nails, then up at the young tree, now steady in the breeze. "I don't want revenge," she said. "Just results. That's what this is." They sat down beside each other, 3 women across 3 generations, with the tree casting the faintest shadow between them. There was no fanfare when they cut the cake. Just clean slices, warm plates and the soft clink of forks tapping porcelain. No one laughed. No one needed to. The peace was louder than anything her family had ever said. Frances raised her glass of lemonade. To endings that feel like beginnings, Kayla added. And to not letting blood dictate legacy. Martha smiled, the lines on her face deepening in the candlelit dusk. She didn't toast. She didn't need to. After they cleaned up and Frances wandered home, Martha stood at her kitchen sink rinsing the icing off the spatula when her phone buzzed. It wasn't Thomas or Renee, it was an unknown number. She tapped it open and read the message aloud under her breath. "We've seen the coverage, Miss Holloway. Your story's making waves. The National Elder Rights Coalition would be honored to have you speak at our next summit." There was a pause after the message, not from the phone but from within. She dried her hands slowly, watching the reflection of the little red maple sway in the glass. She had been dismissed, erased, minimized. And still she remained, still she grew. Still they hadn't reached her. The microphone crackled once, then cleared. Martha stood behind the lectern in a room lined with studio lights and a soft navy backdrop. The only thing louder than her silence was the waiting. 3 seconds passed. 4. Then she began. "My name is Martha Jean Holloway," she said, her voice low but certain, "and I'm here to talk about exiting without apologizing." Kayla stood behind the camera, steadying the tripod, tears glinting in the corners of her eyes. She didn't blink. Not once. The room wasn't full, but it didn't need to be. The speech would be streamed to over 100 elder rights centers across the state, retirement homes, advocacy offices, support groups for women with no next of kin. The audience was waiting for permission to do what Martha had already done, draw a line so sharp it cut the past loose. "They tell us to be graceful," Martha continued, "to age quietly, to hand over the reins to children who never asked what we wanted. But I didn't raise a generation just to be erased by it." The words settled in the air like a storm front. Heavy, righteous, true. Her speech, handwritten in a clean notebook, lay open in front of her, but she rarely looked down. This wasn't performance. It was proof. I was mocked at my own birthday party, filmed, dismissed, humiliated. And for years I said nothing. But silence doesn't mean surrender. Sometimes it's just the sound of strategy. In the back, Frances leaned against the wall, wearing a t-shirt that said "Try me in court again." She dabbed her eyes once with a napkin she'd crumpled into a ball. Martha pressed on. "They thought death was the only deadline. But we don't owe them that weight. We don't owe them an ending they feel entitled to." She looked directly into the lens. Kayla adjusted the focus just slightly, and Martha's eyes came into crystalline clarity. "I changed the locks. I revoked the power. I rewrote the will, not in bitterness, not in vengeance, but in truth, because legacy should be earned, not assumed. And my peace?" She paused. "My peace is not negotiable." When she stepped back from the microphone, there was no applause. There didn't need to be. Across the state, in break rooms and communal lounges, people sat upright with the fire of recognition burning in their chests. After the broadcast, Martha didn't linger. She walked outside into the late autumn air, leaves swirling down from the maples like confetti meant only for her. Kayla caught up to her and hugged her from the side, leaning into her shoulder. "You didn't just close a chapter," Kayla said quietly. "You published the whole damn book." Martha smiled, brushing a leaf from Kayla's hair. "And I made sure the ending was mine." The next day, she met David at his office. The final document waited on the polished oak desk, a notarized certification of execution confirming every amendment, every name, every intention she had sealed into law. He slid the final sheet toward her. "Last line, and it's done." She read it slowly, savoring the weight of its meaning. Then, with her favorite black pen, the one Charles had gifted her the year Kayla was born, she signed it. David leaned back, eyes scanning the document one last time. "You've made it airtight," he said. Then, after a beat, "and unforgettable." Martha stood. The room felt warmer somehow. Lighter. On the way out, she passed the framed diplomas on his wall and paused. "Tell me something," she said. David looked up. "What's that? Do they still think I'll be remembered for the cake?" He smiled. Not anymore. Back home, the house stood quiet, clean, secure. Her photo still hung on the community center donor wall. Her name still sat on the deed. The red maple in the yard had held its leaves longer than expected. She walked to the study, glanced once at the fireproof safe, then stepped back. No need to open it. They'd already heard everything they needed to. They gave me a cake that said almost done. I gave them a will that said already gone.